Hurricane Melissa. It began as a ripple in a sea of clouds, a small kink in the trade winds sliding west from Africa. 100 such ripples cross the Atlantic each year. Most vanish into the blue, a few breathe, organize, and earn a name. This one would become something else entirely. It would carve its mark into the Caribbean, bend palm forests to its will, and etch a new line in the record books. We call it Hurricane Melissa. A hurricane is nature's most powerful heat engine, a living circulation that feeds on warm ocean and moist air. Not every warm water thunderstorm can become one. The planet sets strict terms. Water at least 26.5 degrees Celsius over a generous depth. A humid atmosphere where towering clouds can build without choking on dry air. A gentle hand aloft so winds don't shear the system apart. And latitude. Enough distance from the equator for Earth's spin to curl air into rotation. Add a spark, a tropical wave, or a disorganized cluster of storms, and the engine can catch. Warm water evaporates from the sea surface. Bursts of air rise, cool, and condense, releasing hidden heat. That heat warms the core. Pressure falls, wind accelerates, and more moist air is hauled inward. It is a feedback loop. The storm breathes, it tightens, it strengthens. At the heart of a mature hurricane sits the eye, eerily calm, with sinking air and often a glimpse of blue. But ringed around it is the eye wall, a fortress of thunderstorms where the worst winds scream. Outside, long rain bands arc like arms, delivering bursts of rain and, sometimes, tornadoes. The storm towers 5-10 miles high. At its summit, air spreads like silk, a delicate outflow that ventilates the engine below. When outflow is efficient, when the water is deep and warm, when the atmosphere is saturated and wind shear relaxes, the system can do something that keeps forecasters awake at night. It can explode in strength. We call it rapid intensification, a jump in wind speed that seems to defy the clock. In mid-October of 2025, a wave rolled off Africa and trekked west under the steady push of the trades. For days it carried showers and gusts and not much else. But as it reached the central Atlantic, satellites began to notice persistence, thunderstorms rebuilding near the center, curved bands hinting at circulation. The Caribbean ahead lay warm, deeply warm, heat soaked to surprising depths. By the 19th, the disturbance neared the Lesser Antilles. By the 21st, the swirl had a closed center and sustained winds, just enough to earn a name. It was Melissa now, still small, still ragged, moving reluctantly toward the heart of the Caribbean Sea. Early on, upper-level winds leaned on Melissa, tilting its thunderstorms, making it hard to stack a coherent column from sea to sky. But the ocean beneath was patient. The longer Melissa lingered, the more heat and moisture it could ingest. Convection burst, collapsed, and burst again, each cycle tightening the circulation a bit more, each night's cooling of the cloud tops yielding newer, colder overshooting domes around the center. By the 23rd, the hand aloft grew gentler. The storm began to stand straight, to breathe easily. In microwave imagery, hints of a nascent eye winked on and off like a signal trying to lock. Then came the phase forecasters dread to predict but know when they see, the rapid climb. Between the 25th and the 27th, Melissa's winds surged. Pressure fell in steps, then in leaps. The eye cleared, a tiny coin punched through boiling cloud. Thunderstorms wrapped seamlessly around it, forming a perfect, symmetric ring. By the 27th, Melissa had crossed into major hurricane territory. By dawn the next day, it reached the apex, Category 5, its winds near 185 miles per hour, its central pressure plummeting below 900 millibars. The presentation was textbook and terrifying, a small, razor-lined eye, a solid eye wall with no gaps, outflow feathering like a starburst at the top. The engine raged, and its track pointed directly at Jamaica. On the morning of October 28, Jamaica waited under a bruised sky. Radios barked evacuation orders for flood-prone zones. Shelters took in families with bags of clothes and documents. The ocean withdrew a breath, then returned, the swell now heavy and insistent. Melissa approached from the southwest, almost leisurely, 9 miles an hour, a crawl that promised hours of wind and sheets of rain. Along the coast of Westmoreland Parish, the horizon looked wrong. Not a line, but a wall. Cloud stacked upon cloud, the world slanting as the first kiln-hot gusts arrived. At 1:30 in the afternoon, the eye wall reached land. Near New Hope, the eye punched ashore. The exact numbers felt unreal, sustained winds around 185, a pressure so low the island seemed to bow beneath it. The effect needed no numbers. Roofs lifted as if persuaded by invisible hands. Trees, proud in morning light, leaned and then lay down flat by afternoon. Salt spray blew like sand across streets that had become rivers. The air itself felt like it had teeth. The parish of St. Elizabeth sank under water. The low fields and coastal roads vanished into a single brown mirror. Power snapped out across vast swaths of the island. A hum of generators replaced the familiar electric hush. Cell towers faltered. The map went dark. The slow march of the eye wall meant misery was measured not in minutes but in hours. Rain bands wrapped, unwrapped, then returned, each band a fresh assault of whiteout rain and squalls that screamed like trains. Hillsides, soaked to the core, let go in sudden slides, burying roads with mud the color of chocolate. Rivers clawed out of their banks and sought new paths. Where those paths crossed towns, living rooms filled to the windowsills in less than an hour. Even in the eye's sudden calm, a surreal hush with slips of blue sky, there was no relief, only an uneasy inventory. Who is safe? What still stands? Which walls are cracked? How high the water is now? Then the back eye wall arrived, and everything began again from the opposite direction. By morning, Melissa had crossed the island and tasted land long enough to blink a notch weaker, but still a brutal storm. It slid back over water, angled toward Cuba's southeast. In Jamaica, the wake was raw. Neighborhoods rearranged, orchards stripped, boats thrown beyond roads, power lines sagging like wet ropes across intersections. Over 500,000 people were without electricity. It would take days to count and weeks to repair, but the numbers could never capture the faces. Shopkeepers sweeping out mud, a grandmother cradling a photograph rescued from a wet drawer, a child fascinated and afraid of the hum of a relief helicopter overhead. Cuba had watched Jamaica's ordeal and prepared. Evacuations, hundreds of thousands moved inland or uphill, shifted the human landscape overnight. When Melissa's corps reached Santiago de Cuba in the small hours of October 29th, its winds had declined to a still deadly category, and its rains took center stage. Valleys filled, bridges disappeared into brown water, roads broke where hillside meets ravine. But the early moves mattered when daylight finally showed the mess. The tally of lives saved by getting out early told its own quiet story. In Jamaica, the scale of the disaster sharpened as the water pulled back and the sky cleared to a blue that felt indecently bright. St. Elizabeth, Westmoreland, Manchester, parishes sorting themselves, neighborhood by neighborhood. The radio found its voice, crackling through battery sets, where to get clean water, which clinics were open, where tarps would be handed out. Bulldozers nosed into piles of tree limbs and tin. Chainsaws sang. In scattered courtyards, the rhythms of daily life, cooking, washing, arguing gently about how to fix a fence, reappeared as acts of defiance. Why was Melissa so strong? The Caribbean in late October was a hot reservoir, 30 degrees at the surface, and crucially, warm deep into the upper ocean, so the storm could churn without dredging cold water. The air above was thick with moisture. There was little dry air to invade the core and choke convection. Shear, that disruptive change of wind with height, relaxed at the worst possible time, letting the storm stack vertically like a tower of blocks you can't tip with a finger. Aloft, the storm found a path to exhale, outflow that whisked spent air away, lowering pressure within and inviting more inrush at the surface. The slow forward speed kept the core over the same banquet for hours. The ingredients lined up, the engine redlined. The result shocked even those who have spent careers watching numbers flicker and eyes sharpen on their screens. Storms draw comparisons the way stories find rhymes. Melissa's winds at landfall stand among the fiercest measured in the Atlantic. Its pressure belongs in the short list of the deepest. For Jamaica, it will be the reference, the storm against which future ones are measured, a line on every long-lived islander's timeline, before Melissa, after Melissa. Records exist to frame memory and to nudge policy. Building codes, once adequate, suddenly feel thin. Drainage that handled the last 100-year storm needs a second look. Power grids, coastal roads, hospital roofs, everything becomes a question. Rebuild as it was, or rebuild as it must be. Hurricanes speak three languages of harm: wind, water pushed, and water fallen. We remember the wind because we see it clearest. The trees bent, the roofs gone. But in storm after storm, it is water that does the quiet arithmetic of loss. Storm surge takes land and does not give it back quickly. Rain loosens the seams of hills and carries soil and seed and memory downhill. Melissa spoke all three languages fluently. Its surge invaded low coastlines and canals. Its rain unstitched slopes and filled valleys. Its winds finished what the water began. The result is not just damage to structures, but to routines. Harvests missed, schools closed, clinics overrun, shops without stock, tourists gone elsewhere. An island's economy is a web. Break enough strands and the whole shape sags. And yet, in the hardest weeks, the human pattern reasserts itself. People line up for water without pushing. A neighbor shows up with a generator lead and says, "Run your fridge off this for an hour." Teenagers become specialists in tarps and knots. Cooks become logisticians. Church halls become warehouses. Group chats become quiet miracles of coordination. Recovery is not a single project, but 1,000 small ones. Cleaning a clinic so it can reopen, grading a road so it no longer eats axles, rewiring a pump house so pressure returns to taps. Government ministries, international agencies, NGOs, and neighborhood committees all learn one another's cadences. Progress feels slow until one morning you realize the market is noisy again and the air smells of fruit instead of wet plaster. For scientists, Melissa is a data set as much as a disaster. Reconnaissance aircraft dropped instruments through its core. Satellites watched day and night as the eye tightened, and the eye wall pulsed through cycles of collapse and rebuild. Radars on Jamaica and Cuba painted cross-sections of wind and rain we rarely capture so close to a Category 5 landfall. All of it feeds models that might, next time, recognize the signs of rapid intensification earlier, warn more precisely, buy 3 or 6 or 12 extra hours for a community to move to higher ground or to lash down what can be saved. Forecasting has leapt forward in a generation. The hardest nut still to crack is the timing and degree of those bursts of strengthening that can turn a dangerous storm catastrophic between sunrise and sunset. Melissa will sharpen those tools. There is a larger context that resists being cinematic but insists on being heard. A warming ocean is not a metaphor. It is a measurement. Warmer air holds more moisture. When that air rises in a hurricane's updrafts, it releases more latent heat, stoking the engine. Sea levels, millimeter by millimeter, are higher. Surge rides in further, even if wind speeds stayed the same. None of this causes a particular storm the way a match causes a flame, but it does load the dice. The rarest outcomes inch closer to the middle. Storms that would have peaked a category lower now have just enough extra energy to find the top rung. Rapid intensification events, once rarer, appear more often. The lesson is not doom, but math. The tail of the distribution is thickening. Our preparation, our codes, our expectations must move accordingly. In the quiet after, a different kind of inventory begins. The tally of gratitude. Who checked on whom? Which bridge held? Which decision, made 2 days earlier, saved a dozen lives? Jamaica will tell and retell these stories. The volunteer who stayed at the shelter doorway through the worst wind to relatch it, the nurse who hiked a flooded mile with a cooler of insulin, the radio host who kept reading lists of names into a dead-eyed microphone until the generator coughed back to life. Cuba will tell its own, about buses that rolled all night and shelters where strangers became neighbors. In the Bahamas, towns that braced and were spared will still remember the weight of waiting and will stock their storerooms differently next season. Rebuilding is a choice repeated 1,000 times, to replace like with like, or to add a hand's breadth of height, a better bracket, a window that can bear a thrown branch. It is tempting, after the shock fades, to save the cost now and spend it again 3 storms from now. But Melissa's lesson, like others before it, is blunt. Pay once to build wisely, or pay repeatedly to build quickly. The math is cruel up front and kind over years. Breakaway ground floors, roofs tied down to plates, substations on platforms, floodable parks where water can go instead of into living rooms, mangroves and reefs tended as infrastructure, not scenery. These are unglamorous answers that, taken together, are the difference between a city that reopens in weeks and one that limps for a season. In the end, a hurricane is an argument between ocean and sky, with land caught in the middle. We cannot win that argument, only learn its grammar, anticipate its verbs, and refuse to be surprised by its loudest sentences. Hurricane Melissa will be studied for the way its eye formed and shrank, for the symmetry of its peak, for the place and pace of its landfall. But it will be remembered for the hands that pulled neighbors from floodwater, for the hum of a generator shared, for the first lights winking back after a week of dark, for the mass in a church that had no roof but had voices again. The sea is warming. The dice are tilting. But knowledge grows, too. Forecasts sharpen. Communities rehearse. Governments invest. People learn the shapes of safety, which window to brace first, when to leave, what to carry, who to call, where high ground actually is. If Melissa's fury leaves anything lasting beyond scar and ledger, let it be urgency without panic, humility before physics, and a stubborn commitment to build for the world as it is, not as it was. This was Hurricane Melissa, born of warm water and patient wind, honed by perfect conditions, remembered in names and numbers and stories. May the next storm find us wiser. Stay safe, stay ready, and never confuse the calm of the eye with the end of the storm.